Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Smart Living Hawaii's podcast, where we discuss smart homes and technology, sustainability, healthy lifestyles, and smart business. My name is Christina Laney Mitri, and I'm your host. Today, we'd like to continue our Sustainable Leaders series and have a talk story with Kiersten Faulkner, the Executive Director of Historic Hawai Foundation. We will learn how to put Hawaii's historic buildings, structures, objects, sites, and how they play a big role in our future with listening and learning from the past. We're going to dive into the past of Hawaiian culture, not only how it reveals a sustainable way that we once lived, but also unfolds a thriving community that worked together with the land, ocean, and people. And this just goes to show how preservation is precious, and we'll learn how Historic Hawaii Foundation does that. Aloha, Kiersten.
Aloha, Christina. It's so nice to be here with you.
You too. Well, what I would like to do before we begin is read your bio really quick. Kiersten, she is the Chief Executive of Historic Hawai Foundation, and she oversees all aspects of its preservation programs, strategic planning, business lines, and operational matters. Prior to joining HHF in 2006, Faulkner was a senior city planner for the city and county of Denver. She holds a Master's of Arts in Urban and Environmental Policy from Tufts University and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Okay, well, let's dive right in. Welcome. And what is your background? I always like to start there because I know it sounds like you were in Denver. Maybe how did you make your way over to Hawaii and get into this world of sustainability?
You know, like a lot of people, Hawaii found me more than I found Hawaii. And it's been a long and winding road, but I'm originally from Colorado. So the Four Corners area, which is the Southwest, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. So it's sort of high desert, low forest, right on the edge of the mountains. And that area is actually known on the continent as the county with the highest density of archaeological sites in the West. So this idea of having archaeology and indigenous peoples right in the backyard, literally, we would dig in the dirt and dig up pottery shards and arrowheads and, you know, do class field trips to see archaeological sites. And I think that really embedded a love of history and exploration and wanting to know about the people who came before. So that was sort of my introduction to what is preservation. It was really about learning about how people interacted with place and how that place shaped people and then how people shaped their place. And when I went to study, it was really with the idea of doing environmental studies and sustainability and natural environment. And in the course of doing environmental policy work, I was really introduced to this idea of urban planning and how communities are formed and how people can make great living spaces that complement nature and climate and the natural world. So that nature, culture, history, built environment connection, I think really underlies a lot of the work I do today with Historic Hawaii Foundation. And of course, it's a natural fit in Hawaii as well. You know, that sense of indoor, outdoor living, the sense of we take care of the land and the land takes care of us. That is deeply embedded as an ethic of this place. So it was a nice fit.
And then how did you find your way to Hawaii?
Oh, you know, it was very interesting. I had a great friend who was maybe about 4 years older than me. And so she was always doing everything first. You know, she would graduate first and go out to college first. And she came to Hawaii from Colorado for school and had come back for the winter breaks, the Christmas breaks, and was talking about this wonderful experience she had in this island in the Pacific and how it spoke to her. And for the next 4 years, I thought, I'm doing that too. So I came here for school, was here for about 4 years. And then right after getting my bachelor's, I moved to Asia. I was in Taiwan for a few months and then eventually joined the Peace Corps. And then I was in Thailand for the Peace Corps time and spent some time in Southeast Asia. And then eventually went back to Boston for my master's degree. And then ended up in Denver doing community planning. And then when the position opened with Historic Hawai Foundation, I was invited to apply and made my way back. So it was not a straight and direct road. You know, it kind of wandered all over the world, but eventually found my way back here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. I didn't realize it was from 2006. It's been a long time already.
It has. You know,
Time is flying.
When I took the position, I agreed to stay for 3 years and it's been 16. So I guess that all worked out.
I know. So for those of you who don't know, why don't we jump into what the Hawaii Historic Foundation does and how it all began, maybe from the beginning, how it began and then what it does, and then go from there.
So Historic Hawai Foundation is a nonprofit organization. We work statewide, and it was founded in the early 1970s. So it was incorporated in 74, but of course there were some earlier meetings and so forth. So if you think back to the late 1960s, the early 1970s, and what was happening in Hawaii at the time, you know, it was post-statehood, a lot of building boom, the jet age was starting, so tourism was becoming a thing. The Vietnam War was going on, so there was this huge military presence, and this kind of rush to modernize and rush to Americanize was really being pushed. And so there was this rapid change that was sort of bulldozing everything. Highways were being built and bypass roads and high rises and hotels and resorts. And this kind of boom cycle also had a lot of casualties. You know, Chinatown used to be twice as big as it is today, but all of Ala and everything Malka, Beretania was being bulldozed. And whole neighborhoods were being kind of sacrificed to this building boom. So there were people who were alarmed by that. They were saying, you know, wait a minute, what about old Hawaii? What about our roots? What about our culture? What about our environment? Let's take a breath here. Let's take a pause. And they started to hold, I call them listening sessions. At the time, I think they just called them, you know, community meetings. Mm-hmm. But they went around all of the islands and had these community talk story sessions. And they said, you know, what do you value about your community? What do you care about? And certainly economic development was part of it. Housing was part of it. Infrastructure is part of it. But a big part of it was we're not like Southern California. You know, we're not like other places. We are Hawaii. And so there was a sense of, can we protect what's precious and special? Yes, change is going to happen. Yes, development is going to happen. Can it be more targeted? Can it be more appropriate? And so after those talk story sessions, they gathered and had this big conference in the Monarch Room at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel in Waikiki. So this was in 1974. And 500 people came together and they said, we're going to make an organization. So Historic Hawai Foundation was essentially born in the Monarch Room of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. Wow. And at the end of that meeting, they decided to incorporate it as a nonprofit. They decided they would be member-based. And the idea of members is to be tied to those communities, to be grassroots, to have people have their voices heard. So it wasn't just a closed group of, 12 people that talked to each other. It was always this kind of grassroots member community-based organization. And we've been going for, at this point, 47 years and have continued with that idea of this place matters. People have a voice in protecting this place, and we need to obviously be relevant, but we also need to be fierce in our protection. So that's where we started, and that's how we, tried to continue ever since. So with your membership, how many members do you have today? We have approximately 1,000 members, and it varies. It's always an interesting question, because is one membership record one member, or is it their whole household, or is it, everyone they bring? So our mailing list is about 3,500, but people who actually annually say, here's my dues and I'm a member and I vote at the annual meeting and so forth, it's about 1,000.
Okay. And is it like just for those that are listening and might be interested, what are your dues and how does it work to be a member?
So the dues start at $50 a year. We do have a student rate, and so we do encourage students to get involved, at the beginning of their career and their community service. And then it's just a sliding scale going up to $5,000. So people can give as much or as little as they're comfortable and have the ability to support. And being a member, there's obviously the annual dues, but there's also the ability to attend the annual meeting, vote for the board of directors, hear the annual report, and so forth. It's really more of a statement of support for the mission than it is about, you get something. We don't give away keychains or t-shirts or anything like that. It's really about being part of a community of people that care about this mission.
Yeah, for sure. So what exactly do you guys do? What all encompassing, with your mission that you guys have, what do you actually do so everybody can have a better idea of, how to either support you or to volunteer or, maybe join you?
It's a great question. Because we're statewide, we have to tailor our services and what we do to the needs of each community. So I realized long ago that there's no way that one organization can save everything that needs to be saved. There's not enough time, money, energy, people. It's not possible. And so the goal here is to build a network, build a community of people that all together can work on identifying the special places and the tools that help them engage in preserving, protecting, funding, taking care of those places. So we focus a lot of our energy on letting people know what is special about Hawaii. What's out there? Where did it come from? Why is it here? Who was involved? What's the design? What's the construction technique? What do we have? Why do we have it? Where did it come from? So that kind of public education. And then the next step is, what are the tools available to us? What are the techniques, the standards, the guidelines, the incentive programs, the regulatory programs? What are they? And so a lot of our work is trying to understand them and share them, but also to shape them, to help shape the regulations, to shape the legislation, to shape the standards. And then the third part is applying them. Do people have access to incentive programs, whether that's tax credits or finding a good handyman who can help you fix your windows, And so that idea of, first we have to know what we have, then we have to know how to take care of it, and then we need to have tools where people can actually apply them. So those are roughly the buckets that we work in. And depending on whether someone's an individual homeowner, they might have a different level of interest than, say, the leader of a government agency. They would be looking at maybe a policy level versus, I have a historic home, how do I fix my kitchen, right? And so we try to have tools at all those different levels. And then the other thing that people get, I think, really excited about is just learning more, what's in your backyard. So especially before the pandemic, we tried to have a lot of tours and hands-on activities and just getting people out there. But one of the things we learned during this time of virtual gathering is better ways to share online. So we have some virtual tours, we have a lot of Zoom-based presentations, talk stories, just somebody saying, here's a place I care about, let me tell you about it. So that's been really fun too.
All right. Well, I guess the next step is to dive into what is historic preservation and how does it work and what does that consist of? So I know that you do partner with, you're not necessarily the curators of everything and making sure everything is preserved, but just maybe some of the partners, I'm assuming museums or individuals that own some of these. I mean, sometimes it might be landmarks or homes, but yeah, maybe you can dive into that a little bit.
Preservation is a bit of an umbrella term, and it covers a lot of different types of activities. So a little bit of, I guess, vocabulary. But if you think of it as a continuum of everything from, let's take care of what we have. Basically good housekeeping and maintenance is preservation. If you're treating for termites and fixing the roof and making sure the faucet doesn't drip, that's preserving a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is the museums and the historic house museums, where like Iolani Palace, where they want it to be as meticulous and exact as it was in 1873, and you have, velvet ropes and gloves. So everything in between is also preservation. So it's not only about museums and artifacts, it's also about places where we live and play and gather and shop and worship. And, so if you think of, I'll say Ala Moana Park, which is a regional park that everyone loves. That park is on the State Register of Historic Places. And it, was built in the 1930s. It has these wonderful Art Deco features. It's got this rich history, but it's a gathering place. And taking care of that park is also preservation. So think of it as everything from good housekeeping to museums, and in between is just caring for and being a good steward of our community spaces.
Now, how do you help either the community or the state and city and county preserve these places? Because I'm just going to bring up one that's close to home for us is the Pearl Harbor Historic Trail. And I stumbled on this. The part that we've kind of been working on is about 5-mile stretch that runs along Pearl Harbor's kind of bay. And it starts at the stadium and kind of ends getting closer to like Waipahu side and, that area. And it continues on, and there's a way that it could all the way connect to Kapolei. But the part that's been pretty bad has been this area that we clean up. And during the pandemic, we had it wasn't seeing any cleanups for like 18 months. So last April we did a cleanup and hui together about 30 different groups and had over 300 volunteers, spaced out in groups of 10 and everything to follow protocol during COVID. And this year we're doing it again. We do it, twice a year, one in October and one then, but it's it has so much history to it, and it has all these natural springs, and then you've got the history of Pearl Harbor, and you've got all of this flowing in down this strip, and there's so many people along it, and all of these different owners and all of these community supporters. But there's, I feel like most don't know the history. And I was just talking to Andrea about it too, that maybe there was a way we could put together like a flyer or something about this, and have, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you guys, is it on a registry? Is this something that you guys have on your list by chance? I don't even know.
That is a great example of a community pulling together to care for a place, right? And the Pearl Harbor Historic Trail, as you mentioned, has lots of segments. And so it's mostly intact, but there's some breaks in between, where the trail was never quite completed. And so when you talk about caring for it, it's mostly things like picking up rubbish, clearing out vegetation, maybe patching the pavement or the concrete, right? But it's also about things like the historic signs. what
Mhm.
was this place? What do you see from it? Those springs are a great example. Freshwater springs along the coastline were precious and still are. And of course, all of Pearl Harbor used to be lined with native Hawaiian fish ponds. And so many of those have been filled and, built on top of, but underneath the surface layer, those fish ponds are still there. And so if people can learn more about the landscape and these features and these cultural connections, then they tend to have more of a sense of pride. And with pride comes a sense of stewardship and caretaking and wanting to be good caretakers of this special place. But if all they see is a bunch of illegal dumping and overgrown kiawe trees and some, rubbish, and you don't feel safe out there and whatever, then that erodes it. And pretty soon you forget what made this special in the first place. So it's never done. I mean, that's the thing about preservation too. You're never finished. You can never say, oh, we built the trail and we're done. You have to be able to go back and say, let's take care of it. And whether that's these community work days or, an adopt a trail or just refreshing the signs every once in a while or doing a new map or, sharing those stories in some ways, it all matters. And it's all part of the preservation ethic.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was learning about, I guess, I just saw a link right before this that Andrea had sent me. I think it's on Hilo, and this really cool interactive project that you guys worked on online. And it has a map with different places, and it kind of goes through historical backgrounds of these different locations in Hilo, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't get a chance to look at it. But things like that, I feel like you said, it does really give people an understanding. And I think more and more people are wanting that type of education and finding value in, even if they're tourists, even if they're coming to a place, I think people are wanting to see that culture and that history and learn about it and be able to feel more than just a luau or things like that. So having these things that you guys put together, I think is very valuable to that preservation and that support for that community. So I am going to definitely have to chat with you later about if there's a way that we could do something like this for this trail, because there's so many points along the way that would be really neat to either have something interactive on your phone or even to the point of having plaques up, along this path to activate it and have it be an educational piece for our community. Because as of right now, it is just a path that people use as a commute or just, for leisure and not necessarily education. So, yeah.
But technology gives us so many more opportunities to share the story, because the signs or the wayside markers that are actually in the place, I love those. I'm one of those people that goes to the national parks and stop at every wayside, pull out and read every word on every sign. It drives people crazy, but I love that. But not everyone can go to the national park and pull off on every wayside, and so having the virtual visitation and also something you can go back to, that offers a new way of engagement. So the Hilo example you just shared, we call it the Hilo Story Map, and these story maps are a GIS-enabled system, right? But you don't have to have a GIS app. It's just browser-based, and so you can see.
Does it know where you are in reference to?
That one does not, but we have another one for the Hawaii Capital District in downtown Honolulu. And that one actually has like a little path, like start here and go here, and you can kind of follow it. So if you have it on your phone and you're actually there, you can kind of walk through and take them. Here's stop 1, here's stop 2, here's stop 3. But you don't have to. You can do it from your desk or just wherever you are. So we've done, our first one was the Hawaii Capital District. So starting with Iolani Palace and kind of walking through the whole heart of Honolulu Civic Center. And then we did another one for Haleiwa on the North Shore on Oahu. So that's another one you can explore. And then Hilo on Hawaii Island. And each one of them looks a little bit different, but they all have a map. They all have sort of essays about the historic context or background of the place. And then they have sites, and so you are here, you look at this building, you look at this fish pond, you look at this landing area, and it tells you a little bit about it. All of them have contemporary photos. What does it look like now? The Hilo one also has archival photographs and maps where you can kind of go back and say, what did it look like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago? And we're working on one right now for Honaka'a, also on Hawaii Island. So that should be released for later this summer. And our idea is to just keep picking historic areas around the state and telling their stories through these story maps. And we're very fortunate. We've partnered with Cultural Surveys Hawaii, which is an archaeological and cultural resource management firm. And they have the technology, they have the GIS, they've got the tech side, but they also have the maps. They have that archaeological and context data. And then we've been partnering with local academics and schools. So with Capital District, we worked with Mid-Pacific Institute and their historic preservation class. So a bunch of juniors and seniors actually did some of the research and writing. For Hilo and Honaka'a, we're working with UH Hilo and their history department. And so this became part of their school assignment, to learn research techniques, to learn how do you read these maps? How do you find these archival information? How do you make sense of it? So it's also an educational project in that way.
Maybe LCC or something.
So that's exciting too, because people like to learn how to find information, right? Even if they don't become professional historians, it's sort of like people who like to research their family history, where they get into genealogy and where was great grandma born and that sort of thing. This is sort of researching the genealogy of a place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's something that, like you said, it's just going to give a purpose to that location. I mean, we've been pulling out 8 to 12 tons of trash. There are probably 30 cars that we're trying to get off of the Navy land as we speak. It's been very difficult. And, there's a lot of homeless encampments that need to be removed. There's places where we want everybody to feel safe, because with these cars, they turn into like chop shops, where, there's stolen cars and then it turns into illegal activity that takes place. So because of those things, we do have HPD coming in and, making sure that during our cleanups and everything, that everything's good. And then when we do have things cleared out, some of these nonprofit organizations, a Rotary Club, for example, right by Blaisdell Park, is working on the springs area, the natural spring area, and they're planting native plants and manicuring it and taking care of it. And what it looked like a year ago, and what the city has done to, remove a lot of the vegetation. And now it's, blossoming into something that can be, aesthetically pleasing in addition to educational. So those are the kinds of things that I'm always eager to support, and to see how much interest we've gotten within the community has been huge. And that's why I think something like this would be a great add-on to encourage other members within our community in Pearl City and Aiea and even Waipahu, even going all the way to Kapolei at this point, will ever beach to Kapolei, because there is plans to connect it due to the rail. And it does run along the rail. So there's a lot of people and funding that will be going to this trail in the future and near future, I say. We're working with congressmen and members as well to move this forward, and the mayor. So I think a lot of this would be really great to just activate it. So that's awesome. Now that's just one little piece of what you guys do. I mean, it's actually like a small little piece, But, you know, just because it's ever so present, and this is Earth Month actually right now, and we have our cleanup coming up on the 23rd of April, which I'm not too sure if this is going to air in time, but I mean, you know, these are the kinds of things that are on top of mind for me. And I'm like, oh, we definitely need to talk about it. Maybe we can switch gears and talk about some other things, which is definitely along the lines of my real estate career, is the historic homes. So I would love to jump into this one as well. We're about halfway through our time frame here, so it'd be good to dive into historic homes and architecture. That would be fun to jump into. So feel free.
You know, when I was growing up, my mom would love to take us to open houses. And even, you know, she wasn't buying a house, but she just liked to go into houses. And she called it her Goldilocks syndrome, you know, after the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where, you know, this little girl breaks into the Three Bears house and pokes into all the closets and eats their porridge and sleeps in their bed. She wasn't that bad, but I mean, my mother wasn't that bad. But she would always just talk about how much she loves homes and loves houses, and she would always drive down this one kind of tree-lined boulevard that had pretty modest homes, but they were all, you know, probably 70, 80 years old, and they all had the same setback and the same kind of roof lines, but they were all individual too. And she would just say, oh, I love this street. And so that kind of sense of what makes a neighborhood, what makes a home, it's obviously the architecture, but it's also the setting, you know, whether it's the trees and the yards and the neighborhood parks, and how people get together, and just sort of the stories of the families that have lived there over time. So I always think of her and her Goldilocks syndrome when I talk to people about their homes, because it comes through. They start to say, I love my kitchen. I love the light that comes in and how I grow my herbs in the window, and I can, you know, look out and see my yard, or you know, it just that sense of safety and belonging and continuity. So I think of our historic neighborhoods, our historic homes, as one of the just special, precious assets of Hawaii. And so yeah, there's different programs to recognize that. Obviously, the Hawaii Register of Historic Places is one that people can say they can nominate their home or their neighborhood, you know, like Lower Manoa, College Hill area. It's the whole area was nominated, you know, so it wasn't just here a house, there a house, everywhere a house. It's you know, the whole kind of district. And then the idea is, you know, the history, the context, when was it subdivided, who was the developer, are there architectural styles? You know, you think of the Tudor Revival homes at the base of Diamond Head, or kind of the gingerbread homes in Kahala, or you know, those gracious 1920s kind of colonials in Manoa, or the plantation homes in Ewa Villages, or you know, they all have their own character and personality. So these different programs basically are to help people save that. You know, there are tax breaks for historic homes on property taxes.
Could you explain what those are? Just people are probably curious.
Yeah, and basically city and county, actually all of the counties, not just Honolulu, they offer different property tax, either reductions or credits for different community benefits. You know, it might be for nonprofit organizations, or for child care centers, or, you know, schools or hospitals. So basically the idea is there's a benefit that comes to the public that the city can support by reducing their taxes rather than by just giving them money, because you know, it's easier to reduce taxes. So one of those programs is to offer a property tax reduction if you dedicate the historic home for preservation. So basically saying it won't be redeveloped, it won't be demolished, you'll keep the character that makes it historic in the first place. You know, so you're committing to preserving this historic place and making it viewable to the public. Not that the public can go inside and kind of rummage through your closets, that's my mother, but not the general public. So you don't have to, just throw it open to anyone, but they do have the benefit of seeing these neighborhoods and experiencing that place and being able to see it from the outside. So by taking on those conditions and those responsibilities, it's basically a 10-year program where the property owner says, I will preserve this historic property, and the county says, we will reduce your taxes. And as long as everyone continues to meet those conditions, this property tax continues. So there's a whole process, of course. First, it has to be on the historic register. Then you have to apply for this tax break. Then you have to meet all the inspections and make sure the conditions are being met. But as a result, the property tax reduction means that hundreds of these homes are saved, that otherwise might not be. So I think of, Eva Villages, and which is a lower income community. It allows them to save these homes, and they might not be able to otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So when the home is under, they actually are on the registry, you said it's a 10-year stint. So does that mean?
Let me clarify. It's two different programs. One is on the register, which is a state program, and one is a property tax reduction, and that's a county program. And to get the property tax reduction, you have to do both. It has to be on the register, and you have to meet the conditions for the property tax reduction. But you can be on the register without getting a tax break. And just because you don't get a tax break doesn't mean you're off the register. So people have to remember that being on the historic register is forever, with or without a tax break. It's a commitment you make. The tax break is just to make it easier.
What happens if somebody sells the property to somebody else?
It runs with the land. So the historic designation is for the property, not for the property owner. So the property can be bought, sold, inherited, transferred, leased, rented, doesn't matter. It's still a historic property.
And then what if they don't follow the guidelines and they start doing something to the house?
That's always a danger, right? And so part of the system that's in place is permit review. So when a property owner wants to do something, I can't even think of a good example, change out all the windows, add an addition, paint it, not painting, well, actually painting too. If it triggers a permit, then that goes through a permit review process. So painting doesn't trigger a permit. So people can paint without anyone ever looking at it and saying, oh, why did you paint that home purple? There's no review. And so that's where education matters, where we can let people know what is appropriate or not appropriate for taking care of these historic homes or other buildings and properties too, not just homes.
The sound is getting softer.
Oh.
I'm not too sure why. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Okay, it sounds really soft now. Hold on. I'm at 100%. Sorry. Maybe just talk a little closer. I'm not too sure why. It started going but it's still recording.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know how to fix that.
How bizarre.
Well, we're kind of getting close to our time anyway, right?
I mean, I could hear you. It just noticeably got softer for some reason. But go on.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know what I was saying.
Oh, you were talking about the different things that you could do to a home with a permit.
Yes, so the permit review. So the idea is if people know what are the best practices, what are the standards, what are the guidelines, how can they be good caretakers of a place? They can obviously choose to do that. You can decide you're going to take care of a place, but they need to know how. And so a lot of our educational programs are about that. What are those standards? What are those guidelines? Who can do the work? How do you know? And then the second part is if you're getting a permit, both the county reviewers and the State Historic Preservation Division reviewers will look at it and say, are you meeting those standards and guidelines? Yes or no? And if yes, good, go forward. If no, then they'll tell you how you can. And so that's the kind of check and balance, for committing to taking care of a place. You need to know how to do that. And then the permit review says, here's how you do that. So that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's simplified, of course, but
it's not that you can't renovate or update things, to, have a new toilet or certain things like that. But and then from my understanding, a lot of it too is the visual aesthetics of what it looks like from the street as well, because you're also wanting to make sure that the people that, let's say, they go on tours or they want to look at some of these homes, because they're on the registry, they're able to go. What day is it? On a Saturday? Which Saturday of the month?
Second Saturday of every month. And it's, again, from the outside, just visual from the outside. No, you're absolutely right. There's a continuum of what makes it livable. So yes, upgrade the plumbing, upgrade the wiring, add Wi-Fi, have security systems, but in a way that respects the character and doesn't just, take out all your original wooden double hung windows and put in, prefab vinyl, do that. But also there's a hierarchy, the outside is higher priority than the inside. The public spaces are higher priority than the private spaces. So something like the front elevation you see from the street is more important than the utility closet. It's sort of a obvious thing, but you'd look more at the bulk and the mass, and the materials are more important than the doorknobs. Which isn't to say you can't have beautiful crystal doorknobs and
I totally was going to say.
Of course. It's just that if you're making trade-offs, and so usually we see a lot of updated kitchens, a lot of updated bathrooms, a lot of updated wiring, but you can, because you don't want the old knob and tube wiring that's going to burn your house down, right?
Yeah.
You want to update
to code, and you want to
absolutely
be much more safer. Yeah.
And even things like accessibility, you want to, and especially as people age in place, you want to have things like ramps and maybe elevators if, if the home is big enough, or if people need accommodations. All that's fine. But the standards tell you how to do it in a way that's respectful and harmonious, and not just sort of stuck onto the front and just kind of looking weird.
Yeah, so there are homes out there that when you do purchase, they're already on the registry and set up this way. And then there's also homes that are not, that would be perfect candidates. So, people may consider putting their home on the registry, and then do they come to you first to ask for directions or what to do?
So there's a formal process and an informal process. So I'm actually happy to tell you that we are working right now on a website and a brochure specifically for realtors and their clients.
Awesome.
So later this month, we will be releasing that. And the Honolulu Board of Realtors is celebrating their centennial anniversary this year. And so they're planning on having that be part of their kind of rollout for the centennial. But it'll answer a lot of these questions. It'll say, what does it mean to buy or sell a historic home? What does it mean to own a historic home? Where can I get more information? So we'll be sharing that out in the next couple of weeks. And then also on our website, historichawaii.org, there's a downloadable PDF that talks about the whole process. How do you research? How do you complete the nomination form? What are some of these architectural terms? Where do you find information? And, like many things, you can either do it yourself or you can hire someone to do it, depending on your time and level of interest. But that guide, that how-to guide, is a wonderful place just to learn more. And then the formal process is basically through the state. It's the State Historic Preservation Division. And then there's a board called the Hawaii Historic Places Review Board that's appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And that board is responsible for reviewing these nominations and deciding, first of all, are they complete? Do they tell us everything we need to know in the form? We need to know it with, the photos and the maps and everything we need. And then number two, did they make their case? did this meet our criteria for being a historic property? Is it documented? Is it complete? Is it accurate? And then they make findings to say, yes, we believe it's historic because of its architecture, or historic because it's associated with a historic person or an historic event, or because of its archaeology, or, and they make findings. They hold a public hearing. So the nominator gets to speak, the property owner gets to speak, the public gets to speak, and they can describe, what is this place? Why is it important? How is it significant? And then the review board votes and they say, yes, we're going to list it, or no, we're not going to list it. Sometimes they say, go back and do more work and come back to us. And then once it's listed, it's official, so that's the formal process. But before it ever gets to them, of course, the nomination needs to be researched and written and completed.
How many homes do we actually have on the registry?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but we do have districts where there's multiple homes in an area. I mentioned Ewa Villages earlier. So, there's several hundred in Ewa Villages. There's quite a few in Hilo. There's quite a few in Nu'uanu and Manoa. Many, oh man. So, a couple thousand maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was that many, but that's statewide, right?
Statewide, yes.
Architecture, maybe I've always been a fan of Aussie and I know I wanted to find a way to learn or figure out how many Aussie homes there are. I don't know how to even find something like that out in Hawaii or on our island anyhow. But things like that, I guess, was there specific design? You've mentioned some of them off the top of your head, but were there specific architectural designs that were known here in Hawaii or that were brought here that are pretty common that you can mention really quick when people are, just out and about and seeing certain things, or maybe landmarks that you can mention so they'll recognize them?
I think people who grew up in Hawaii or have spent a lot of time here, they know them, but they might not know that they know them. But if you go back to the first Polynesian voyagers landing on these shores, they brought with them the building traditions of Tahiti and Marquesas and, the Polynesian islands. And obviously they used natural materials, so wood, stone, shell. And so if you think of like the earliest building types, there's the monumental architecture like heiau or fish ponds. It's basically dry stack rocks and maybe a gate or an altar out of lashed wood. And so wood and stone and natural materials are very much that Hawaiian architecture. And I think even fast forwarding 800 years, we still see that use of wood and stone and natural materials, not only in the landscape, but in the buildings themselves. And that's something I think really resonates with people. They'll see these cut basalt commercial buildings downtown, and, that's Hawaiian bluestone, or they'll see ohia wood floors, and that's native wood flooring, or posts that hold up the carport, that kind of thing. And then, of course, besides the monumental kind of engineering works, other than that, Native Hawaiian pre-contact architecture was very light on the land. It was posts and thatch roofs. Each building had its function. You'd have the sleeping house and the lanai, which was basically just sort of a sun shelter. You'd have the cooking area, but they were for their purpose. You didn't have some architect going, I know, I'll do something sculptural and neat and everyone will look at it and point at it. That's a kind of Western idea that came later. But then with Western contact came new construction techniques, came new architectural techniques. So whether that was ships, shipbuilders, they brought joinery and rope making. And, so you look at sort of like old Lahaina town and that whaling industry and the old Lahaina prison. And, they brought joinery because that's what you used on ships. You didn't have nails, right? Because they rot and rust and break your ship. But the introduction of nails, iron, bracing systems, that came with Western contact. And then later when, especially when Japanese immigration came and they brought the really skilled carpentry of fitting together different wood pieces and joinery. And that became part of the sugar and pineapple plantations, that really skilled craftsmanship for building the plantation towns. So you start to see all of this coming together into a very unique kind of Hawaiian regional style. So especially late 1800s to about 1940, you see it in plantation towns, Haleiwa or Paia or Hana, Hilo, you see them. And then the commercial areas, built on that. And they would have the cut stone and the masonry work and later brick. And so, you just kind of see this layering and layering. And then in the 20th century, we get more of that high style, and so think of, the Museum of Art or the YWCA or the Royal Hawaiian Hotel or the Alexander and Baldwin Building or the Dillingham Transportation Building, very solid. We are here, we are prosperous, we are international, and even earlier than that, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but think about Iolani Palace or Ali'iolani Hale, now the Judiciary Building, which are more European in style, kind of Italianate, but they bring in that idea of internationalism. And of course, Hawaii is the crossroads between Asia and North America. So you also get a lot of Japanese and Chinese influences, and not just in the ornamentation, but in the actual construction techniques. So it's just a beautiful layering of people and place and cultural influences and those all those different groups coming together and sharing what they had to bring, kind of like our food, Yeah,
it's our culture, and it's really neat to see it all layered within everything that we do. So it's not just our food, it's not just our people, it's it's the place and even the homes, and the places that we've built over the years. So it's all really fascinating, and the more that you dig deeper and study all of this, the more you find out about our culture. And like you said, it resonates with you even if you're not born and raised here. I'm born and raised here, but even if you're not, you do come to appreciate how it was created and who created it and why it's the way it is today. And that's a unique thing about Hawaii, and that's why we all love it. And that's why there's people like you, a lot of people that I'm interviewing all the time that are sustainable leaders of Hawaii are drawn to Hawaii for whatever reason. Their gifts and the things that they've learned are brought to Hawaii to make Hawaii better, like yourself. So, thank you. Thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your story and the Historic Hawai Foundation story. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been so fun. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, I know. We're like running out of time. There's so much more that we could address, but that would be part 2, I would say. But one thing, because I'm definitely an advocate for green building and sustainability, climate change and everything, the focus on the homes and being able to preserve homes and use what's already existing is very important. Sometimes it may seem that it is, it takes more work to work off of something and not just swipe it clean and start all over. But all of those materials there that are salvageable and being able to use and, continue it on or preserve it is allowing for things to not be put into the landfills or burned in incinerator. And, then also not having to cut down more trees to start from scratch and things like that. So doing it this way is a more green and sustainable measure. I'm hoping to work soon with a individual who's going to be renovating a home, which is, I believe, 83 years old, and to preserve it, right? And to take what's there and use what they can instead of, tearing the whole thing down. She's also worked on deconstruction of a home when need be, versus tearing it down and it all going to the landfill. So a lot of these things, they do kind of overlap, but it is within our community and making sure that we are more sustainable as a community, and that we can preserve it.
Can I just mention, and thank you for really emphasizing the inherent sustainability of preservation, because when you think about the energy that went into building these places, whether it's the materials or the labor or the shipping, it took energy, and now that energy is embodied in that place. And if you demolish a place, you lose that energy, so that it's kind of like carbon sinks, right? That these existing places reduce our carbon reduction. They reduce our need for new materials, for new shipping, for the fuel that takes, to bring this across the ocean.
Very expensive fuel now.
And so just taking care of what we have is inherently more environmentally sustainable than tearing it down and then replacing it with something else. And they can be retrofit. You can add hot water heaters or solar panels or have more efficient shower heads. Those things are certainly able to be done. But just taking care of what we have is environmentally responsible. Yeah. So I'll just say, a few years ago, we did a series of 6 classes on sustainability measures for homes, for heritage homes. And those videos and materials are on historichawai.org on our website. So we're hoping to be able to let people know more about things they can do, whether it's with their landscape or with water or with energy, but taking care of what we have and then doing that kind of retrofit to make it even better is absolutely the future.
Yeah, and even though our homes are not a specific set to be on the historic registry, moving forward in the way we do things can always, you could do this with any home, right? Because you're going to want to preserve your home, regardless of how it was built or what it was built from or at what time. I mean, if there are some little tricks or little things that we can do, it's always good to share those with everybody. And stay tuned, I guess, because it seems like you guys will have some helpful tips as well. And we'll be sure to support you and promote those when they're out and feature them for sure.
Thank you. It's exciting.
So she has already told us where to visit. So it's historichawai.org. And you can go check out their website for a lot of this information. They have a lot of blogs and other things. There was a whole bunch of links too that I saw that was focused on like climate change, flood adaptation, natural disasters, sea level rise, fire damage, a lot of things that you can do to prevent these type of, like how to preserve yourself, your environment or your space or your homes with these specific things that might come about, right? So lots of helpful things there for you. In addition to, they have a Facebook page, Instagram that you can check out, like their pages as well. And then what's the best way to reach you that you would like to share in the public to everybody?
Member@historichawai.org is the best email address if people are looking for information. And of course, the website. We're mostly still working remotely, so we try to answer the phone, but we're not always in the office. But that's 808-523-2900.
Awesome. Are you guys going to start doing more in-person things, or do you think most of the things that you'll do will be online?
At this point, we're looking at slowly bringing back some in-person, but we're not going to discontinue our online. Our virtual programming has been very popular. It's reached a lot of people, and we anticipate that continuing. So we have a lot of programs scheduled for the next couple of months, and people can sign up for our e-newsletter, and that comes out once a week with updates. That's free. You can sign up through the website. And as it becomes viable to do again, we'll be bringing back some in-person events, but that's still a ways off.
Yeah, well, until then, thank you so much. I've only met you once in person, but maybe we'll have to meet again soon. And I would love to talk to you about Pearl Harbor. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, which is at www.smartlivinghi.org. You can also follow us on Instagram as well and Facebook. And our podcasts are on any platform that is pretty common out there. And you just type in Smart Living Hawaii and you'll find us. So thank you so much. And until next time, live smart. Mahalo, everybody.
Thanks, Christina.